The moment they forced my sister Brielle to remove her jacket in front of that military ceremony, I thought her life was over. But when General Valdez saw what was underneath, his reaction changed everything we thought we knew about honor, sacrifice, and family secrets. I'm Cashin, and this is the story of my little sister Brielle. For 3 months after she came home from Afghanistan, she wore long sleeves in 100-degree weather. We thought she was just adjusting to civilian life. We had no idea she was hiding something that would make a decorated general stop everything he was doing and salute her in front of 300 people. My sister is 22 years old and one of the strongest people I know, but that day at the Riverside Community Center, watching her hands shake as they demanded she remove her jacket, I realized I didn't know her story at all. What happened next didn't just change how our family saw Brielle. It changed how she saw herself. This isn't just about scars. This is about a moment when everything you think you understand about someone you love gets turned completely upside down. And sometimes, that's exactly what needs to happen for healing to begin. To understand what happened that day, you need to know who Brielle was before Afghanistan and who she became when she came home. My sister used to be the kind of person who wore tank tops to family barbecues and never met a swimming pool she didn't want to jump into. She was fearless in the way that younger siblings often are, always trying to keep up with me and my friends, always proving she could do anything we could do. When she enlisted as an Army medic at 19, I wasn't surprised. Brielle had been patching up neighborhood kids since she was 12, always carrying band-aids in her backpack and knowing exactly what to say when someone got hurt. Our mother Vera used to joke that Brielle was born with healing hands. After Vera died from cancer when Brielle was 16, my sister threw herself even deeper into helping others. It was her way of processing grief, I think. Helping others heal when she couldn't heal our family's biggest wound. Our father Henrik was proud when she shipped out. He'd sit in his wheelchair on the front porch every evening, telling neighbors about his daughter, the Army medic. Henrik had been a construction foreman before a fall damaged his spine, and watching Brielle serve gave him purpose again. He'd say, "She's got her grandfather Tobias's courage. He served in Vietnam, you know, it's in her blood." But the woman who came home 3 months ago wasn't the same person who left. I noticed it immediately when I picked her up from the airport. Brielle had always hugged me so hard it hurt. This time, she barely let me touch her shoulder, and the clothes thing started right away. Long sleeves in July in Texas, thick jackets when it was 95 degrees outside. I'd ask if she was cold and she'd just change the subject. Living with her again, I started noticing other changes. Brielle would jump if I dropped a pot in the kitchen. She stopped watching action movies, something we'd done together since we were kids. She'd wake up at 3 in the morning and I'd find her sitting on the back porch just staring at nothing. When I'd ask about her deployment, she'd give me the same answer every time. "It was fine, Cass, just did my job." Henrik kept pushing her to get involved in veteran activities. "You need community, honey," he'd say from his wheelchair at breakfast. "Your service matters. People should know what you did over there." But Brielle would just pull her sleeves down tighter and find reasons to leave the room. The invitation to the military appreciation ceremony came from our neighbor, Mrs. Cordelia Whitman. She's 78 and lost her husband in Desert Storm. Every year, she organized this event to honor local veterans, and this year, she specifically wanted Brielle there. Mrs. Cordelia had a way of seeing through people's defenses. She'd known Brielle since she was 5 years old and wasn't buying the everything's fine act. "That girl is carrying something heavy," Mrs. Cordelia told me one afternoon while we were both getting mail. "Sometimes the bravest thing a soldier can do is let people see their battles." For 2 weeks, I watched Henrik and Mrs. Cordelia gently pressure Brielle to attend. Henrik would mention it during dinner. "General Valdez himself will be there. It's an honor, sweet Bia." Mrs. Cordelia would stop by with homemade cookies and casually mention how much it would mean to have young veterans represented. Finally, Brielle agreed, but only because she couldn't disappoint Mrs. Cordelia. The night before the ceremony, I found her standing in front of her bedroom mirror, staring at her reflection. She was wearing the same heavy cardigan she'd worn every day for 3 months. "You don't have to go if you're not ready," I told her. "I'm fine," she said, but her voice was too quiet. It's just a few hours. Shake some hands, smile for pictures, come home. Bree, what aren't you telling me? She turned away from the mirror and looked at me with eyes that seemed older than they should have been. Some things are better left alone, Cass. Trust me on this one. That morning, getting ready for the ceremony, I watched her put on her dress uniform underneath that cardigan. It should have been a moment of pride, seeing her in military dress. Instead, it felt like watching someone put on armor for a battle they didn't want to fight. Henrik was excited as we drove to the Riverside Community Center. This is good for her, he kept saying. She needs to be around people who understand service. But I could see Brielle in the rearview mirror, checking and rechecking her zipper, pulling her sleeves down, preparing for something none of us understood. I thought I was taking my sister to be honored. I had no idea I was about to discover who she really was. The Riverside Community Center was packed beyond capacity that Saturday morning. Red, white, and blue banners hung from the ceiling, and every seat was filled with families, veterans, and community leaders. The air conditioning was struggling against the Texas heat, and the crowd, making the room uncomfortably warm. I could see sweat forming on Brielle's forehead, but she kept her cardigan buttoned all the way up. We found seats in the third row, right behind Mrs. Cordelia, who turned around to squeeze Brielle's hand. "You look beautiful, dear," she whispered. Brielle managed a tight smile, but I noticed her immediately tug her sleeves down to cover her wrists. The ceremony started with the presentation of colors, and I watched Brielle stand with perfect military posture during the national anthem. For a moment, she looked like the confident soldier I imagined she'd been overseas. But when we sat back down, that anxious energy returned. She kept checking her zipper, adjusting her sleeves, and I could feel the tension radiating from her. Henrik was beaming from his wheelchair in the aisle seat, waving at people he recognized. "That's my daughter," he kept telling anyone who would listen. "Army medic, served overseas." His pride was infectious, and it made what was coming even harder to watch. About 30 minutes into the ceremony, the event coordinator, Ms. Delphine Reeves, stepped up to the microphone. She was a crisp, efficient woman who ran these events like military operations. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll now begin the official recognition ceremony with General Valdez. All honored veterans, please prepare for photographs." I felt Brielle go rigid beside me. Her breathing changed, becoming shorter and quicker. "First, we need all honorees to remove any outer garments for the formal photographs. Military protocol requires dress uniforms to be clearly visible for the official record." The words hit Brielle like a physical blow. I watched her face drain of color completely. She grabbed my arm so tightly her fingernails dug into my skin. "Cass, I need to leave right now." "What's wrong? It's just a picture." "You don't understand. I can't take off this sweater, I can't." Around us, other veterans were already standing, removing jackets and blazers, chatting casually about the heat. An older man in front of us joked to his wife, "About time, I'm melting in this thing." But Brielle wasn't laughing. She was looking at the exit like a trapped animal. Ms. Delphine began calling names alphabetically. "Anderson Robert, Brunetti Anthony." Each veteran stepped forward, posed for pictures with General Valdez, a distinguished man in his 60s with silver hair and a chest full of medals. The process was moving quickly, professionally, and inevitably toward the letter H. "Harrison Brielle." My sister didn't move. Henrik turned around in his wheelchair, confused by her hesitation. "Honey, that's you, go ahead." "I can't, Dad." "What do you mean you can't? Of course you can." Ms. Delphine called her name again, louder this time. People around us started turning to look. I could see Brielle's chest rising and falling rapidly, like she was fighting panic. "Miss Harrison, we need you for the photograph, please." General Valdez himself looked in our direction, his expression shifting from professional courtesy to concern when he saw Brielle's obvious distress. He approached our row, his polished boots clicking against the linoleum floor. "Is there a problem here, soldier?" Brielle snapped to attention automatically, muscle memory taking over. "No, sir. No problem, sir." "Then step forward for your recognition." I watched my sister's internal war play out across her face. Respect for military authority battled against whatever fear was keeping her glued to that chair. The room had gone quiet, 300 people waiting to see what would happen next. "Sir, I'd prefer to keep my jacket on for the photograph if that's acceptable." General Valdez studied her more carefully now. "I'm afraid that's not possible, soldier. Military regulations are clear. Dress uniform only for official photographs." Mrs. Cordelia turned around and caught Brielle's eye. She didn't say anything, but there was something in her expression, a kind of steady encouragement that seemed to reach through my sister's panic. Brielle stood up slowly like she was walking to her own execution. "Yes, sir, I understand." Her hands moved to her zipper, trembling so badly I thought she might not be able to manage it. Henrik was watching with growing confusion, finally sensing that something deeper was happening. The room felt electric with tension that nobody fully understood except Brielle herself. "It's okay, sweetheart," Henrik called out, trying to encourage her. "We're proud of you no matter what." But I could see in Brielle's eyes that whatever was under that cardigan, she believed it would change everything about how we saw her. She believed it would change how she fit into our family, our community, our understanding of who she was. She was about to find out she was both completely wrong and absolutely right. Standing there in front of 300 people, with General Valdez waiting and my father watching from his wheelchair, Brielle closed her eyes for what felt like an eternity. I could see her lips moving slightly, like she was having a conversation with herself, or maybe with someone who wasn't there anymore. When she opened her eyes, something had shifted. The panic was still there, but underneath it was something else. Something that looked like the old Brielle, the one who used to dare me to jump off the highest diving board at the community pool. "I need to tell you something first," she said to General Valdez, her voice steadier than I'd heard it in months. "What you're about to see, it's not pretty, and it's not something I've shown anyone since I came home." General Valdez stepped closer, lowering his voice so the crowd couldn't hear. "Take your time, soldier. What's going on?" "I was injured overseas, sir. Badly. I've been hiding it because I didn't want people to see me differently. I didn't want my family to worry more than they already do." I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. Injured? Brielle had never mentioned being injured. Her discharge papers said she'd completed her tour. There was nothing about injuries or medical leave. Henrik wheeled himself closer, his face creased with worry. "Honey, what kind of injury? Why didn't you tell us?" "Because I knew you'd look at me the way you're looking at me right now, Dad. Like I'm broken." Mrs. Cordelia stood up from her seat and walked over to our little circle. "May I say something, dear?" She placed a gentle hand on Brielle's shoulder. "I've been married to a soldier, and I've known many veterans over the years. The strongest ones aren't the ones who come home unmarked. The strongest ones are the ones who come home changed and find the courage to keep living anyway." Brielle looked at Mrs. Cordelia with tears starting to form. "I saved people, but I couldn't save myself from what happened after. Every time I look at my arms, I remember that day. I remember the smell of burning metal and the screaming and how much it hurt and how sure I was that I was going to die." The room around us had gone completely quiet. Even though most people couldn't hear what we were saying, they could sense the gravity of the moment. General Valdez waited patiently, his expression serious but not impatient. "I keep thinking that if people see what happened to me, they'll think I'm damaged goods. That my family will think they have to take care of me like I'm some fragile thing that might break." "Brielle," I said, finally understanding why she'd been so different, so careful, so covered up. "You're my sister, nothing changes that, nothing." She looked at me like she was trying to decide whether to believe me. "You say that now." "I'll say it after too." Henrik reached for her hand. "Sweetheart, I've been worried about you for months, but not because I thought you were broken. I was worried because I could see you were carrying something alone, and I raised you better than that. We're family. We carry things together." General Valdez spoke up quietly. "Soldier, I've been in the military for 32 years. I've seen combat injuries, and I've seen the heroes who earned them. Whatever happened to you over there, whatever you did or whatever was done to you, you're here. You made it home. That already makes you stronger than you think you are." Brielle wiped her eyes and stood up straighter. My mother used to tell me that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's feeling the fear and standing tall anyway. Sounds like a wise woman, General Valdez said. She was. Brielle looked around at all of us, her family, and this stranger who was treating her with such respect. Okay, I'm going to do this, but I need you all to understand that what you're about to see represents the worst day of my life and the day I saved 5 people's lives. Both things are true. She reached for her zipper with hands that were still shaking, but no longer seemed about to run. I've been hiding from this for 3 months. I'm tired of being afraid of my own skin. The crowd sensed something significant was happening. Conversations stopped. Camera phones went down. Even the children in the back of the room seemed to understand that they were about to witness something important. Brielle pulled the zipper down slowly, and for the first time since she'd come home, she was about to let people see who she really was. The cardigan slipped off Brielle's shoulders and hit the floor with a soft thud that somehow seemed to echo through the silent room. What I saw took my breath away completely. Her forearms were covered in thick, raised scars that twisted and curved across her skin like a roadmap of pain. The scarring was extensive, deep, and clearly the result of severe burns. Some areas were smooth and shiny, others textured and discolored. These weren't the kind of scars you get from a kitchen accident. These were the scars of someone who had been through hell and survived it. The room was so quiet I could hear the air conditioning humming overhead. Henrik's hands covered his mouth, his eyes filling with tears as he finally understood why his daughter had been hiding for 3 months. Mrs. Cordelia reached forward and squeezed my shoulder, her eyes knowing and sad. But General Valdez didn't react the way I expected. He didn't step back or look uncomfortable or give Brielle the pitying expression she was clearly bracing for. Instead, he moved closer, studying her scars with the careful attention of someone who recognized what he was seeing. Kandahar province, he said quietly. It wasn't a question. Brielle's eyes snapped up to meet his. Yes, sir. The convoy attack last April. How did you know? General Valdez reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. He scrolled through photos and then turned the screen toward Brielle. Because this is my nephew, Lieutenant David Morrison, and according to his report, a medic named Brielle Harrison saved his life and the lives of 4 other soldiers when their vehicle caught fire after an IED explosion. I watched my sister's face transform from shame to shock to something I couldn't quite identify. General Valdez continued, his voice carrying across the now completely silent room. Lieutenant Morrison wrote that when their Humvee hit the improvised explosive device, the vehicle burst into flames immediately. He was unconscious and trapped in the back seat. He said a medic crawled into the burning vehicle 3 separate times to pull out wounded soldiers, even after her own uniform caught fire. Brielle was crying now, but silently, tears streaming down her face as she stared at the photo of a young man I didn't recognize, but who was apparently alive because of my sister. He wrote that this medic suffered severe burns on both arms but refused medical evacuation until all 5 soldiers were stabilized and transported to safety. He recommended her for the Bronze Star Medal for exceptional heroism under fire. General Valdez put his phone away and stepped back. Then, in front of 300 people, this decorated military officer came to perfect attention and gave my sister the most precise, respectful military salute I had ever seen. These scars don't mark you as damaged, Specialist Harrison. They mark you as a hero. The silence broke like a dam bursting. The entire room erupted in applause that started slow and built into something thunderous. People were standing, clapping, some wiping their eyes. Henrik was sobbing openly, his hands pressed to his heart. Mrs. Cordelia was crying and smiling at the same time. But I was watching Brielle. She stood frozen for a moment, like she couldn't process what was happening. Then slowly, she raised her scarred right arm and returned General Valdez's salute. Her posture straightened, her chin lifted, and for the first time in 3 months, she looked like the confident woman I remembered. Sir, I never received the Bronze Star. You will. I'm making some calls this week. What happened in Kandahar should never have been overlooked. Other veterans started approaching. wanting to shake her hand, to thank her, to tell her their own stories. I watched my sister go from wanting to disappear to being surrounded by people who understood exactly what her scars represented. An older veteran, probably in his 70s, reached for her hand. "I got mine in Vietnam," he said, rolling up his sleeve to show his own scars. "Different war, same courage." A younger woman, maybe 30, stepped forward next. "Iraq 2009, roadside bomb." She showed scars on her neck. "Welcome to the club nobody wants to join, but everyone's proud to be in." I stood there watching strangers become family, watching my sister realize she wasn't alone, wasn't broken, wasn't something to be ashamed of. These people didn't see damage when they looked at her. They saw survival. They saw service. They saw someone who had paid a price they understood. General Valdez approached me while Brielle was talking with other veterans. "Your sister is remarkable. I hope you know that." "I'm starting to," I said, watching Brielle laugh for the first time since she'd been home. "I'm starting to understand a lot of things." The drive home from the ceremony was the first time in 3 months that Brielle sat in our car without her cardigan. She kept her window down and let the Texas sun hit her bare arms, something I hadn't seen her do since before deployment. Henrik kept looking back at her from the passenger seat, still processing what he'd learned about his daughter's service. "5 people," he kept saying. "You saved 5 people and never told us." "I didn't think you'd understand," Brielle said. "I didn't think anyone would understand why saving them felt less important than what it cost me." That evening, for the first time since she'd been home, Brielle joined us for dinner without long sleeves. She rolled up the sleeves of her t-shirt deliberately, like she was practicing being comfortable in her own skin. Henrik couldn't stop staring, not with pity but with a kind of awe I'd never seen before. "Do they hurt?" he asked gently. "Sometimes. Mostly they just remind me of things I wish I could forget." "What kind of things?" For the next hour, Brielle told us about April 15th in Kandahar province. How her convoy was heading back to base after a routine medical mission. How the explosion threw their vehicle 30 feet and turned it into a fireball. How she crawled through flames 3 times because she could hear Lieutenant Morrison screaming for help and couldn't leave him there. The 4th soldier I pulled out was a kid from Nebraska, maybe 19 years old. His name was Tyler. When I dragged him away from the vehicle, he grabbed my arm and said, "Thank you for not giving up on me." That's when I realized my sleeves were on fire. She showed us specific scars, explaining what each one represented. The twisted mark on her left wrist was from when her watch melted to her skin. The smooth patch near her elbow was from a skin graft. The network of thin lines across her forearms was from glass fragments that embedded so deep they had to be surgically removed. I spent 6 weeks in a German military hospital before they'd clear me to come home. Every day, I looked at these arms and thought about how ugly they were, how no one would ever want to touch them or look at them, how I'd have to hide them forever. Mrs. Cordelia started visiting more often after the ceremony. She'd bring coffee and sit on our porch with Brielle, sharing stories about her late husband's struggles after Desert Storm. "He used to say that the hardest part of coming home wasn't leaving the war behind," she told us one afternoon. "It was learning to live with the person the war had made him become." 3 weeks after the ceremony, Brielle started volunteering at the VA hospital downtown. She worked with burn survivors, helping them with physical therapy and emotional adjustment. Watching her guide other wounded veterans through exercises, teaching them how to manage pain and regain strength, I saw my sister become herself again, but stronger. "It's weird," she told me one night after her shift. "Helping other people with their scars makes mine feel less like punishments and more like qualifications." The Bronze Star Medal arrived 6 weeks later, delivered personally by General Valdez. The citation read her full name and described her actions as extraordinary heroism in the face of grave danger, resulting in the preservation of 5 lives at great personal cost. Henrik framed it and hung it in the living room, right next to our grandfather Tobias's Vietnam service medals. But the real change wasn't the medal or the recognition. It was watching Brielle slowly come back to life. She started wearing short sleeves to the grocery store, then to her college classes when she enrolled in the nursing program. She joined a veterans support group and eventually became one of their peer counselors. 6 months after the ceremony, I found her in the backyard teaching neighborhood kids basic first aid, her scars visible and unremarkable as she showed them how to properly bandage a wound. One little girl traced the marks on Brielle's arm curiously. "Do they hurt?" the child asked. "Not anymore," Brielle said. "They used to hurt a lot, but now they just remind me that I'm braver than I thought I was." I learned something important watching my sister's journey back to herself. Sometimes the people we love most carry invisible battles that we can't fight for them, but we can stand beside them when they're ready to stop fighting alone. And sometimes, the scars we think make us unlovable are actually proof of just how much love we're capable of giving, even when it costs us everything. Brielle's scars tell the story of the day she chose 5 strangers' lives over her own safety. They're not marks of damage. They're evidence of grace under fire, of loving people you've never met enough to burn for them. That's not something to hide from. That's something to salute.